where do you come from? Because you're such a polarizing individual, like the most polarizing individual in my lifetime. I've never seen somebody that's either everybody's on one side and they love you. Like your fans absolutely adore you. Everything you say, I mean, they think you're, like you're sent from God, basically, in a lot of these people's eyes. And then you have the other side. And then there's this huge gap in the middle with very few people that are on the fence. It's kind of like one or the other. And so I think this is a great opportunity to show people and listeners, let's start from the beginning. Like, what was little Alex like? When did you all of a sudden realize, like, I'm different, and I'm not going to just fall in line with the sheep and just like, blindly accept what mainstream media is telling me. And you started to buck the system. Like, when did you notice this, like, entering your life?
I was born in Dallas, went to public school, great parents. My mom had a degree in psychology, history. My dad's a dentist and owned medical clinics and other things. And was always really engaged and smart. Had a lot of family that were in a lot of different industries and ranchers, farmers, you name it. So I spent a lot of time on the family ranch. And my mom's brother, my uncle, had been a Vietnam helicopter pilot, special operations helicopter guy that delivered those guys, did a lot of clandestine stuff. He was in Iran-Contra. Was a pretty high-level manager. And then spoke out, not publicly, but, about when I was a teenager, about the things he saw and things that really went on in Vietnam, and then also in Central and South America. He talked about the government, human trafficking even back then, and he and a bunch of the guys got out because they weren't going to be part of it. He didn't even tell me all of it till he was on his deathbed about 11 years ago. And it's all the stuff you see today, but the government shipping little kids out of Guatemala and stuff out of orphanages, things like that. So
So you grew up hearing crazy stories about what the government was doing, and at what point was there, was it just that, or was there a certain book that you read that kind of like made you think differently about the system?
I had no idea that I had, it wasn't just my uncle. The government recruited heavily out of Texas for the military and intelligence. And so I would go to family reunions or just be around family on both sides, and they'd just be sitting around, like even the older guys, like my grandfather's, brothers and people and great uncles and stuff were just going around. Yeah, we put the Nike missiles in with the nukes in Turkey, and that's why the Russians really put their intermediate range nukes in Cuba for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then we were and it was just all, because little kids are sitting there listening to this, and I was just by osmosis hearing it. Wasn't really even interested in it, but I was. And then I was really, I was into sports and stuff, but I also was a bookworm, so I love comic books and science fiction. And so, I was really advanced reader for my age. I was like high school level when I was like 8 or 9. And so I love reading like Robert E. Howard, the original Conan books, written in the 30s in Texas, and just loving all that. And I was reading like H.P. Lovecraft and stuff. By the time I had about 10, though, my mom had all these history books around, and some of them, had pictures in them and stuff. And I got addicted to history instead and stopped reading fiction pretty much entirely. And then voraciously, my dad would never really, if I wanted a bike, I had to go mow lawns for it. If I wanted whatever, I had to get a job very, very young. And so, but they would buy me any books I wanted. And so they had TV ads on. Anybody that's 50 or so remembers this, for Time Life encyclopedias, picture encyclopedias. So it was for adults, but kids could read it. So I would I want World War I encyclopedias. You get a new one like every few weeks in the mail. Boom, my dad would buy it. Okay, I want World War II encyclopedias. I still got them. I want those. Boom.
So nonfiction.
I want Wild Wild West encyclopedia. All these leather bound ones. He probably bought me 30 encyclopedias. My dad, the whole house was just full of books. He was the same way. And Encyclopedia Britannica everywhere. And as early as I can remember, my dad would sit there on my knee just going through an encyclopedia, reading to me about all adult encyclopedias. And so, and And he'd been involved in some secret government projects that he would never really got into. But
Can you get into that?
I mean, he didn't. I mean, it was DARPA, MK Ultra. My dad was basically in MK Ultra, not as a test subject, but in it. And yeah, that was that main project umbrella. He got recruited. He was 14. He was top scores. He was winning these science projects and stuff. Eisenhower had started the Whiz Kid program, but it was still ongoing when my dad was, like 14 when Kennedy was in. And so, and his mom was a principal and stuff in East Texas. So they're like, oh yeah, this is a feeder program for NASA. And so
your dad's mom, your grandma, was a principal.
Yeah, and so she was all into academic and stuff, and so she would enroll him in all these things, all these projects. He was giving speeches, and he had a radio show once a week in Dallas. They drive up from the ranch. He was anti-communist. He was in the John Birch Society. It was basically that. And so the government like, hey, we'll enroll you in a program with NASA, but it wasn't NASA. And they were getting all the other big brains, around the country. And so at 14, he gets put in UT Plan 2. And
what's that, UT Plan 2?
It was a Plan 2 was a project bringing high schoolers into college.
UT, University of Texas.
Yeah,
okay.
and then so he told me about the first phase of it. It was like, okay, you want to be in NASA? Well, you're now going to be a year when you're 14, 15 in Houston at MD Anderson Cancer Research Facility. And so he's in there, and he's in the big quasi-classified cancer wards with terminal cancer patients where people are signing, agreements to take stuff that they know is probably lethal, raw testing. And basically he was put right into the bad scientists because that's at the top of this thing. That's how and he was in there with other, young people from around the country and in there assisting these scientists. And my dad, I remember being a little kid, he was telling me about it. And then after about a year of that, he said, I don't like this. And so they said, okay, well, now we'll put you in another project. And he would never tell me what those other projects were other than it was very interesting. And he told me that they took him under UT when he was like 16 and said, oh, here's the secret nuclear reactors. They already had computers. They already had CD-ROM. They already had all this stuff way advanced and everything else. And then he went into some other projects. And then by the time he was about 20, he said, I'm not doing this. And he decided to get out and then just go get his dental degree and decided he didn't want to be part of it. So I had, because he decided it was bad and whatever they had him doing. And I later from other people learned about it from other people like, oh yeah, you know what, your dad was doing this. And it was basically infiltrating leftist groups and a bunch of other stuff and, wow. Timothy Leary type stuff.
Dr. Jones was plugged in from the beginning, 14.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so I was just in this environment and but I was hearing all this stuff. And then my mom's dad was very eccentric. And
how so?
I mean, he was UT football player, roommates with Tom Landry, founder of the Dallas Cowboys coach. They both left UT to join the Army Air Corps together. And, Tom Landry used to come down to the house, all this stuff. But my point is that he was dialed into a whole bunch of stuff. And he was a big inventor, and he'd wealthy family in Dallas, and was dialed into a whole bunch of that stuff. So he knew about a whole. So I grew up with him talking about all this other space program stuff, and how the government really worked and all the rest of it. And again, his son, my uncle, was very interesting. He was the world champion Morse coder when he was like 16.
Wow.
The best Morse coder in the world.
What does that mean? You're just super fast? Or?
Well, even back then, and
beep,
still,
beep, beep, beep.
That's how they would communicate stuff. So that's what he did in Iran-Contra, which is one of the deals was the dispatches to the White House. See,
is it comprehension
they were still sending that back.
Of Morse code, or is it actual?
It's how fast you can do it.
How fast you can
But
send
it's also, they give you new codes all the time, and that's still some of the best codes that people can't break. And he was telling me they were using like Revolutionary War codes and stuff, but they were all from 1776, they were changing them up. That's the problem with any of this stuff. There's just trillions of data points. And that's what you wanted me to talk about today. I've never really told people.
Right.
Is bigger than just all that, is how my brain works and why it's hard for me to communicate things to people. Because I basically, when I start talking about a subject, I have all these data points that go into how the whole thing works, and then it's hard to extrapolate that with the spoken word. Like, somebody can't be told about the Matrix; you got to see it. Is what I'm saying. So the biggest thing was, I just grew up around all that stuff, and they weren't trying to indoctrinate me. They weren't telling me what I was supposed to do. They weren't saying you should go do this, you should go do that. They were all very critical, and I'm talking about there being a battle inside the government for the future of the country.
And you were just paying attention.
And talking about all these things that by the time I was 16, 17, 18, I was seeing in the news stuff I'd heard when I was a kid, and it was actually happening. And the centralization, the control, the police state, the surveillance, the globalism, all this stuff. And so by the time I was like 18, I was like, or even 17, I was like, I need to do something about this. So I started listening to talk radio. I was calling to talk radio shows on subjects.
So you were calling from your house to talk radio.
Yeah, and I was also, I'd call in and suddenly for the next hour, it'd all be about what I talked about.
And what were they talking about that pulling you to call?
It was gun control and, environmentalists, taking large sections of property for nature preserves that we knew they were just going to steal. And I just saw the globalist agenda, and I was like, wow, this is the big fight for America. This is the future. And I've got this whole background, and I guess already knew way more than most people because I read so much history and also learned so much from insiders about what was really going on, that I just felt this calling without a business plan. It wasn't a business idea or I want to be famous or something. It was, I need to warn people.
Yeah.
I
think that's pretty apparent. Even like going back and watching some of your earliest films where you were the first time you were on camera. I mean, it doesn't take, and anybody can see like, okay, this guy has passion, right? It's pretty, I mean, even the host, like you'd be on some, I don't even know the name of the hosts that were there, but you'd be sitting with them and they'd be trying to dial you back because it's their kind of show. But you could tell it was like, this guy right here is already bigger than the host of this show.